Welcome to another episode of Steele Creek Explorer. I'm your host, Jeremy Stout. This time I thought I'd like to introduce you to some of the park's mammals. Now at first that might seem like a pretty easy topic because mammals are pretty near and dear to our hearts. Shoot, we're mammals. Our pet cats and dogs are mammals. Our guinea pigs, our ferrets. Mammals seem very familiar to us. But in fact, these are some of the most elusive animals in Steele Creek Park. Think about how many mammals you've seen today. Maybe you saw some squirrels in and amongst the trees. Maybe on your way to work or school you saw some groundhogs on the side of the road coming in and out of their holes. But for the most part, we don't see very many mammals in our day-to-day life. And why is that? Well, most of our mammals are nocturnal, meaning they're not very active during the day and they come out at night. Many of our mammals burrow. They spend a lot of their time underground or in places that are largely inaccessible to us. So what we're going to have to do is change the way that we look at them and look for them to see if we can find any here in the park. But first, what is a mammal? Mammals, of course, are vertebrates. They have bones inside their bodies. They are in the class Mammalia. All mammals in the world have hair follicles at least. Most of them have fur or hair covering some or all of their body. All mammals have a high degree of parental care. They actually take care of their babies, and they feed their babies through milk that's secreted from their mammary glands. And of course, most of the mammals of the world are live birthers. They give birth to live babies. There are a few egg-laying mammals in Australia and New Zealand, but most are live birthers. And of course, most mammals have very specialized teeth, which we'll introduce you to in just a moment. Well, as I just mentioned, one of the characteristics that defines class Mammalia, the mammals, is what's called heterodont dentition. Almost every mammal in the world has a unique set of teeth inside of its mouth. No other group of creatures on Earth does teeth like mammals. And you may already be familiar with some of the interesting varieties of teeth. Obviously, you have sharp teeth for stabbing, you have flat teeth for grinding. But let's actually look at some of those dentitions in some native mammals that we have here in Steele Creek Park. I have in front of me several different skulls. These are museum quality replicas that were donated to the Nature Center from a generous donation from the Friends of Steele Creek Nature Center and Park. And first, let's start with the skull of an herbivore. This is the skull of a beaver, which is the largest rodent in North America and the second largest rodent in the world. We do have one family of beavers that lives here in the lake. They have a lodge on the lake, and we see their activity along the lake side. Of course, like all rodents, they have these cutting incisors that are in the front. But behind that, they have these almost accordion-like teeth that are very flat and very good for grinding vegetation. Beavers don't just build things out of the trees that they cut down, they actually eat that wood as well. Let's contrast the classic teeth of an herbivore with that of a carnivore. This right here, a lot of people are surprised at how small this is. This is the skull of a bobcat, which is a medium-sized carnivorous mammal that, yes, does live inside Steele Creek Park. Not very big predators, but they are very powerful, and as you can see, they have the equipment to really do some damage to their prey. The first thing everyone notices with the bobcat skull is the big fang-like canines. But that's not my favorite part about the teeth or the dentition of the bobcat. One thing that most carnivorous mammals have is actually something very, very special. If you watch as the upper jaw closes, this largest tooth on the lower jaw, kind of looks like a capital letter V in the bobcat, actually disappears behind the large tooth in the upper jaw. These are specialized teeth that only carnivorous mammals have, and the teeth are called the carnassials. They actually act as sort of a pair of butchering shears. Rather than meeting tooth to tooth like your teeth probably do, these teeth actually slide behind the others in a motion that's very reminiscent of a pair of scissors. One thing the bobcats lack, like their house cat relatives though, are any teeth for chewing. Most of the obligately carnivorous mammals have a very hard time chewing. They can slice off pieces of flesh, but they can't really chew it up. Now, some host of these characteristics, both carnivorous and herbivorous, you can find in something like the black bear. This is a skull of the native bear to our region, which sometimes can be found passing through the park. Yes, we all know that bears like to eat meat and scavenge dead things when they can find it, and they've got some pretty big scary teeth for doing that. But also inside the skull of a black bear, you have these big fat molars that actually have cusps and knobs on them that look very reminiscent of your teeth. These are excellent teeth for crunching up woody vegetation, eating nuts and berries. Truth be told, black bears can make formidable carnivores, but in our region, they are almost entirely herbivorous. They use these plant-eating teeth much more than their meat-eating teeth. Now that we've mentioned a few notes about mammal biology and anatomy, and we've also mentioned how elusive they can be, let's get out into a couple of different habitats and set some traps and see if we can't show you some live mammals. Well, here we are at one of our best chances to actually see some wild mammals in Steele Creek Park. This is our experimental grassland. Many of you that frequent the park may have noticed this before, and some people think it's as simple as a place where our lawnmowers just forgot to mow, but in fact it's a lot more special than that. We have close to the Civitan shelter on the north end of the Stacey Grayson Memorial at Steele Creek Park. We have an experimental plot about 2 acres in size, where we have controlled plantings of some native grasses to the East Tennessee and Steele Creek Park area. And this has been ongoing now for over 10 years, and we have to maintain this very rigorously. We actually burn this grassland every other year, which helps knock out some of the trees, some of which you might see popping up behind me, but allows the grasses to grow. And the burning usually doesn't hurt the creatures that live in this grassland either. And we know from the last time we burned it, just about a year ago, that this home is just teeming with life, especially little mammals that are living inside this grass. We found lots of evidence of Microtus pennsylvanicus, the eastern meadow vole, which is a very common mammal in our region, but it's very elusive, it's very secretive. Unless you just happen to be digging up their habitat or burning their habitat, you almost never find them. So we'll set out some traps and see what we find here in Steele Creek Park today. Well, this is the smallest trap that we're going to be using today. This is called a Sherman live trap. It's a pretty simple design. I'll show you that in just a moment. And of course, it's entirely humane. It's just a little box trap that traps the little rodents in overnight. We're here late in the evening and we're going to check these early tomorrow morning. And it's very simple. All you have is just the back wall of the trap that has some things that a little rodent might like to eat. We've got some corn kernels, some thistle seed, all stuck to a little blob of peanut butter. Sounds pretty delicious to a human now that I mention it. But it's just got a little spring-loaded trap to where when the back wall is up, a little rodent might come inside, and when it steps on the back panel, he's trapped inside. Of course, as I mentioned, this is entirely safe for the creature. He even has a nice little snack to tide him over until we come over in the morning to see if we've caught anybody. So what we're going to do, hopefully we have found an entrance that's pretty close to one of the burrows of one of these little creatures. And I definitely see some sign in the vegetation that makes me think that we might be close. So what we're going to do is put this down, slightly concealed in the grass and in a shady place. And we're going to set up 4 of these. And so I can remember where they are. I'm going to set up a blue flag right on the outside of the grass so we'll know where we put our trap. We'll come back tomorrow morning and see what we find. All right, well, we've just set our Sherman live traps up in the grassland. Now we're in a totally different habitat where we might find some wild mammals of Steele Creek Park. We're in a wooded area, but we're right at the lake edge. This is a wonderful habitat for muskrats, which is a semi-aquatic mammal. They are rodents. They're similar to a beaver, but not nearly as big. And we do have some active burrows in the bank here that are probably attributed to muskrats. So we've got a similar food item as we had in our Sherman traps, but we have more of it. We've got peanut butter, peanuts, thistle, and some corn. We're going to set this in our trap, which is a little bit more of a substantial trap than those little Sherman live traps, and we'll see if we can't get us a muskrat, or at the very least, maybe a squirrel or even a chipmunk might get trapped in here. All right, so what we have here is a similar trap as the Sherman live traps, except this one has a double entry, one on each end. And I also have this one chained to a tree, not to protect the trap, but actually to protect any creatures that we might catch in here overnight. Some of the bigger mammals that would fit in this trap could actually bounce the trap into the lake. And of course, even aquatic mammals, even if they may be aquatic, like all mammals, they must breathe air. And so we wouldn't want the little guys to bounce the trap into the lake and drown. So we'll leave this overnight and see what we find in the morning. Well, we're back out in the grassland after we set our traps yesterday, and I'm really excited. We've got our field guide to mammals of North America here, because I'm not a mammal expert, but the first trap we've come to, the first trap we've set, as you can see, it's been tripped. So we're going to open this up and see what little guy we might have found in here last night. Skunked. Looks like we got somebody who triggered the trap without actually going in. That's what happens sometimes. Well, we set out 4 traps yesterday, and aside from the one close call that we had, it looks like we didn't catch any small rodents in our Sherman live traps. That's okay. Of course, we know these creatures are here in the grassland, and we'll just try again next time and see if we don't have better luck then. But now we've still got a medium-sized, small to medium-sized mammal trap down at the water's edge. We can go see if we caught anything in it. Well, we didn't find anything up at the grasslands with our Sherman live traps, but now we're back on the lakeside where we set our muskrat trap yesterday evening. So let's go ahead and follow this little trail and see if we found anything. The trap's been deployed, but it's empty. And now this is interesting. I see we have what's left of our little foam plate that we had our bait on yesterday. And I think we might have evidence as to our culprit. Here we have some scat that is well formed and looks like it's from an omnivore. We've got a lot of evidence of berries and things in here. That is almost certainly a raccoon's scat. And that's pretty close to the scene of our crime here. What I suspect has happened, this trap, which is much too small for a raccoon, is plenty large enough for a raccoon to have put his hand in. And yes, they do have little hands that look a lot like ours. And he deployed the trap, but he was able to pull the food out. And you can see he absolutely licked this plate totally clean and even left us a little present to discover his identity right over there. Okay, we didn't find anything in the trap, but we do have evidence that somebody visited our trap last night. Pretty cool. Well, we may not have caught any mammals in our live traps that we had set out, but over the last several weeks, the Nature Center has actually been employing the use of trail cameras, motion-activated infrared cameras that we've placed around the park to capture some of the nocturnal inhabitants that are moving through. We've done this one of a couple of different ways. One is that we find active game trails, trails that wildlife use just to move from point A to point B. In those cases, we put up the cameras and we get the passers-by. This is a great way to find deer, raccoons, and other mammals that are just moving through. Another trick we've employed is actually baiting the cameras. We had a deer that had been road killed in the city of Bristol, but had already decayed to the point that it was not fit for human consumption. We took that deer way out into some of the wildest areas of the park. We tacked it down to the ground and we set our trail camera up to watch it. We got over 2,000 pictures and the deer was completely gone within the first 4 days, not even a bone left. And as you can see, we got lots and lots of pictures of coyotes that were coming to scavenge on the carcass. We don't know exactly how many different coyotes were coming to the carcass because we never got more than one at a time in the same picture. But we think there were at least 2 or 3 unique coyotes coming to this carcass. Another thing we did, we actually went to the active beaver lodge on the lake and we set up one of our cameras to watch it. It was there we actually got some really good photos of some of the beavers that were coming in and out and doing some work around the lodge. All right, well, we didn't find any live mammals to show on the episode today, but we did have lots of evidence of their existence in the park thanks to our trail cameras. And of course, we have a lot of other evidence. We find tracks and scats and other evidence that the mammals are here in the park. Of course, we must remind you to not ever approach or try to handle any wild animal that you find in the wild, but do come to the Nature Center where we have exhibits on many of the native animals. We even have a collection of skins and furs where you can actually see what they would feel like safely. But definitely make your way into Steele Creek Park because that's where you can be the explorer.